And despite my effort to be strategic by putting myself at the front of the group to avoid chaos, it completely backfired. Immediately after I did this, we hit the one climb on the course and everybody went absolutely bonkers. As y'all might have noticed, this spring I've dabbled in a variety of different racing. I've done 2 of the Southeast gravel events, finishing second place in both of those. I did a weekend of road racing in St. Louis with the Texas Roadhouse squad, doing mediocre there. And then most recently, I went up to Wisconsin for a UCI mountain bike race. And my original plan for the season was to do some of these adventure gravel races in the spring and then to peak for the Belgian waffle rides in May. But those events have gotten pushed back to the fall, which has kind of put a damper on my plans. And the whole thinking behind this schedule was that we were having a baby at the end of May, which would probably mean some forced time off the bike because I guess I have to raise a kid or something like that.
And a 1.
So with the permission of my very pregnant and very wonderful wife, I headed north to Wisconsin to hit the UCI Englewood race and Wars Series race on May 15th and 16th. And with her thumbs up, I jumped in the van with Kevin and Gus Bratetic, which I have to say, thank you all for letting me hitch a ride with you guys. That definitely made the trip a lot easier. Before riding the course, I had this overwhelming sense that I was out of my element. My original plan was to race crits all summer, and I hadn't raced my mountain bike that hard in several years. However, once we got to the course and I did a few pre-ride laps, I felt a lot better because the course did feel a lot like a cyclocross course. There were a lot of grass open sections and only a few really technical rock sections, which were definitely nothing that I couldn't handle. The course itself was only about 4 miles and only had about 100 feet of elevation per lap. It also had a really good balance between tight turny sections and open power sections. There were only 2 really technical rocky sections, one at the midway point and one right before the finish, and there was only 1 major climb on the course. Both of my races were 5 laps long. Saturday got things kicked off with the UCI events, which meant riders were called up based off of first UCI points and then USA Cycling points, neither of which I had, which meant I started at the very back of the group in the 5th and final row. So with wide bars and a strong field, I didn't make up that many spots in the start. And there was one really long grass section where I could have moved up, and in hindsight I wish I had, because as soon as we hit the single track, 50 riders trying to go into single file caused a giant bottleneck, and I was at the back of that. And I knew that while that was happening, the leaders were just increasing their gap on me. So for the first lap, I had to make a lot of moves. I had to pass anytime the trail widened, and I had to pass people through turns anytime they left the door open. So by the end of the first lap, I was around 25th place, about 25 seconds behind the leaders, and my average heart rate was only 182 for the entire lap because I had spent most of the lap behind slower riders. On lap 2, I managed to catch the second group on course and eventually work my way through them and continue my chase to the lead group, which was still sitting about 15 riders. And about halfway through the second lap, I did catch the leaders, and just as quickly as I caught the leaders, there was a crash on one of the most technical spots of the course, And while I didn't crash, I was forced to track stand while I waited for these riders to get out of my way so that I could continue my pursuit of the leaders.
Go, Drew.
About a half a lap later, I did catch back up to the lead group for the second time and once again watched them ride away from me as the last few riders from the group got popped off and I had nowhere to pass because we were on one of the longer trail sections of the course. Eventually, the trail did open and I was able to pass, and I continued to chase once again. My average heart rate for lap 2 was 188, which was the highest of all the laps of the race because I had spent the majority of that lap chasing down the leaders. And finally, after 2.5 laps of racing, 45 minutes into the race, I had finally caught the lead group. And since I had caught them on an open grassy section, I made the decision to burn a match to get to the front of that group, riding all the way up to 4th place, thinking if I could get to the front of this group, I would not get stuck behind any more chaos and have to chase back onto the group again. This was also where I saw my highest heart rate of 193 beats per minute. And despite my effort to be strategic by putting myself at the front of the group to avoid chaos, it completely backfired. Immediately after I did this, we hit the one climb on the course and everybody went absolutely bonkers. I'm not sure if me moving up into the group caused some chaos and provoked some attacks or if it was just terrible timing on my part, but either way, I couldn't hang and eventually got dropped from the group once again, except this time I had nobody to blame it on. After getting dropped from the lead group for the final time, I decided to settle into a pretty decent pace and found myself riding with longtime pro Brian Motter and young rider from Bear Development, Robbie Day. But unfortunately, after going really deep for 45 minutes and having not really done that many hard efforts on my mountain bike, I was suffering from some pretty serious back pain in the latter half of the race, and eventually I had to watch these two riders ride away from me, and I ended up rolling in for a 12th place finish on the day. After getting dropped from the leaders on the 3rd lap, my average heart rate for the rest of the race was 183 and never went over 188. And overall, I'm pretty happy with this result, considering that for half the race, I had to ride at a faster pace than the leaders just to catch up, and I hadn't really even anticipated racing my mountain bike at all in 2021. The second day of racing was a non-UCI Wars Series race, which meant that a handful of the guys who had done the UCI race the day before decided not to race. I was pretty stoked about that. I was also pretty stoked that I got to start second row, because that meant I had a much better start and went into the single track sitting top 3. With a smaller group of only 6 riders, our first 3 laps were faster than the UCI race the day before. And at this point, I had drifted to the back of the group of 6 to strategically try to find a way to beat at least one of these guys so that I could make my way onto the podium. However, it was about at the midway point when we started to hit a ton of lapped riders, and eventually 2 of the riders in this group were able to ride away from us, and we found ourselves in a group of 4 chasing these leaders. Eventually, Brian Motter made his way to the front of our chasing group to try and bring us back to the leaders, and Carson Beckett was sitting behind him. Carson had gotten second the day before in the UCI race, so I'm pretty sure he was hurting at this point and couldn't hold on to Brian's wheel. So, not being able to get around Carson, I had to watch Brian Motter ride away, and he eventually caught the leaders and finished 3rd. With only half a lap of racing left, I found myself with Carson Beckett, and we were racing for 4th place. And it looked like it was going to come to a sprint finish, which I was totally okay with because Carson is quite a bit smaller than me, and so I thought I could probably take him in a sprint. However, on the last technical rocky downhill section, a lapped rider got between me and Carson, and there was a little bit of a gap. And I had to put my head down and really chase him down hard, and it came down to a bike throw at the line and a photo finish, but it was just enough to get 4th place. So with a much better start position in Sunday's race, I was able to find myself in the lead group and not have to chase to get there, which totally changed the race for me. And with that in mind, I couldn't help but to wonder what Saturday could have been if I had started with the leaders. But that's racing, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Here are a few key takeaways that I learned from this race weekend. Number 1, train like you'll race. I hadn't done any hard efforts on my mountain bike in a long time, and I definitely paid the price during Saturday's race with some back pain.
How's his back? Horrible.
I should have done some hard efforts on my mountain bike to get my body used to that position before getting on the start line. Number 2, 90 minutes is a lot longer than I thought. I had kind of thought, well, it's just a little bit longer than a cross race. And then about halfway through the race, I saw a lot of riders downing gels, which wasn't something that I had considered. So I probably should have planned for some more nutrition during the race besides just my liquids. That's all I've got for this video. So if you liked it, please consider subscribing. And until next time, y'all stay rad.